All right, so get ready, because today we're going to dive into something pretty cool. TestNG.
Yeah.
You know, I've been working on this project recently, and it's got a ton of tests. And honestly, it felt like I was herding cats, you know?
Yeah.
And then I found TestNG.
Right.
And things just started clicking. So I'm excited to see what we find out about it in this deep dive.
It sounds like you're having a really common problem that anyone who works in software testing runs into.
Yeah.
Especially as your projects get bigger.
Yeah.
Managing all those tests can be a real pain.
Right.
And what's really interesting about TestNG is it goes beyond simple unit testing tools.
Okay.
Like Junit or Unit.
Right.
It's a full framework
Wow.
designed to handle everything from small unit tests to those big end-to-end scenarios.
So it's like having one tool
Yeah.
that can manage like the entire testing landscape.
Exactly.
That sounds pretty promising.
Yeah.
So what makes TestNG so different from those other tools?
Yeah, one key difference is its scope. TestNG is built to handle a much wider range of tests than just those other tools. But what really makes it stand out are things like parallel testing, grouping and prioritizing tests, and detailed reporting.
Gotcha.
It's all about making your testing more efficient.
Right.
And giving you a really clear picture of how healthy your application is.
Okay, let's break that down a little bit.
Sure.
You mentioned parallel testing.
Yeah.
What exactly is that, and how does it make things more efficient?
Okay, so imagine you have hundreds of tests.
Okay.
And each one takes a couple minutes to run.
Yeah.
Running them one by one could take hours.
Hours, yeah.
But parallel testing with TestNG allows you to run multiple tests at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Using the power of those multi-core processors that everybody has.
So instead of waiting for each test to finish before starting the next one, we can have like multiple tests running all at the same time?
Exactly.
With a well-coordinated team or something.
That's a great way to put it. This can drastically reduce the total time it takes to run all your tests.
Right.
Especially for larger projects.
That makes sense.
Now let's talk about grouping and prioritizing.
Okay.
Just like you might organize your tasks into different categories.
Yeah.
TestNG lets you group similar tests together.
Okay.
This makes it much easier to manage and run specific sets of tests.
Yeah, I can see how that'd be helpful for targeting specific areas of your code.
Right.
What about prioritizing?
Okay, so
Why would we need to run some tests before others?
sometimes there are dependencies between tests.
Okay.
Like you might have a test that sets up a database connection.
Right.
And other tests need that connection to work properly.
Okay.
TestNG lets you define these dependencies, which makes sure that the tests run in a logical order,
Right.
and it prevents false failures
Yeah.
from happening because something wasn't set up properly.
That makes sense. You wouldn't want to test the checkout process if the shopping cart hasn't even loaded. So we've got parallel testing for speed grouping, for organization, prioritizing for dependency management. What about those detailed reports that you mentioned?
Right.
What makes them so special?
TestNG generates really comprehensive reports in both HTML and XML formats.
Okay.
These reports go beyond just telling you which tests passed or failed.
Right.
They give you detailed information about each test execution,
Okay.
including things like how long it took to run, any exceptions that were thrown, and even logs.
Oh, wow.
This level of detail can be super helpful
Yeah.
when you're debugging and trying to figure out why a test failed.
So it's giving us like a much deeper level of insight into our tests.
Exactly.
And it's like a simple pass or fail.
Yes.
I'm starting to see why you're so excited about this.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, all this talk about TestNG has me curious about how it actually works.
Okay.
Is there some kind of secret code involved?
And it's not exactly secret code.
Okay.
But TestNG does rely on a clever mechanism called annotations.
Annotations.
Annotations are like special tags or markers that you add to your Java code.
Okay.
These annotations act as instructions for TestNG, telling it how to interpret and execute your tests.
So instead of writing like a bunch of complex configuration files, we can just add these annotations to our code.
Exactly.
That sounds pretty elegant.
Yeah, it is.
Can you give me like an example of how these annotations work?
Absolutely. One of the most basic annotations is @test.
Okay.
You simply put this annotation above a method in your Java code to designate it as a test method.
Right.
TestNG will then recognize this method and execute it as part of your test suite.
So just by adding that little @ symbol and the word test, we're telling Testy, hey, this is a test, pay attention.
Exactly.
It's pretty cool.
There are many other annotations available.
Okay.
Each serving a specific purpose. For example, a before method and an after method. Annotations define methods that should run before and after each test method.
Right.
So you can set up and tear down your test environment consistently.
So these annotations give us like a structured way to control the flow of our tests.
Yes.
And make sure everything is set up properly.
Precisely.
They help ensure consistency,
Yes,
maintainability,
sure,
and readability of your test code,
right,
which are all really important aspects of writing good tests.
Exactly.
This is starting to make sense.
Oh, good.
But I'm guessing there's a bit of a learning curve involved.
Well, a little bit, yeah.
How easy is it to actually get started with TestNG?
Well, setting up TestNG is surprisingly straightforward.
Okay.
Especially if you're using Eclipse and Maven.
Then you're speaking my language.
Good.
Eclipse and Maven are pretty standard tools for Java development. Right. So what's the first step to set up TestNG?
The first step is to install the TestNG plugin for Eclipse.
Okay.
This plugin gives you a nice interface for working with TestNG within your development environment. You can find it in the Eclipse Marketplace.
Easy enough. So once we have the plugin, what's next?
Next, we need to tell our project to use TestNG.
Okay.
And this is where Maven comes in.
Right.
We add a dependency for TestNG.
Okay.
In our project's pom.xml file.
So the pom.xml file is like the recipe.
Yes.
That lists all the ingredients that our project needs. So by adding TestNG to that recipe,
right,
we're making sure our project has all the necessary components.
Yes, and the beauty of Maven is that it will automatically download and manage the TestNG library for you.
That's a relief.
So you don't have to manually hunt for files and do all that.
That sounds like Maven's doing a lot of heavy lifting behind the scenes.
It definitely simplifies things.
Yeah.
And once you have the TestNG plugin installed and the dependency added to your pom.xml, you're essentially ready to start writing and running TestNG tests.
That sounds pretty manageable.
Yeah.
Now, just to make sure everything's working as it should, how would you typically go about creating that first basic TestNG test?
A great way to start is by creating a simple TestNG class and writing a basic test method.
Right.
This helps verify that TestNG is properly integrated into your project.
Gotcha.
We can walk you through a simple example.
Okay.
But I think it would be more helpful to dive into that.
Yeah.
After we explore some of the core features of TestNG.
That makes sense. I'm definitely ready to see some of these features in action.
Great.
And understand how they can really level up our testing game.
Let's do it.
Awesome.
Let's start by delving a little deeper into annotations.
Okay.
Since they're the foundation of how TestNG works.
Sounds good. So we've laid the groundwork, and I think I'm feeling pretty good about like the basics of TestNG.
Great.
But I'm ready to go beyond the basics.
Okay.
What are some of the more advanced techniques that we can use to really unlock the power of this framework?
Well, one technique that can be a real game changer, especially for larger projects, is data-driven testing.
Okay, data-driven testing.
So imagine you're testing a login feature.
Yeah.
You'd ideally want to try it with a bunch of different usernames and passwords, right?
Right, yeah. Instead of writing separate tests for every single combination, which would be very tedious and repetitive.
Right. It could get out of hand really quickly.
Yeah. So how does data-driven testing help with that?
Data-driven testing lets you run the same test method multiple times.
Okay.
Each time with different input data.
So it's like having one test method that can handle like a whole range of scenarios.
Exactly.
That sounds super efficient.
It is.
But how do we actually feed all that data into TestNG?
Right.
Do we need to create some kind of external file or?
Typically you use an external data source.
Okay.
Like a spreadsheet.
Right.
Or a CSV file.
Okay.
To store your test data.
Gotcha.
And then TestNG reads this data and feeds it into your test method.
Okay, so we've got our data all neatly organized in our spreadsheet.
Yeah, how do we actually connect that to our TestNG test method?
This is where the @DataProvider annotation comes in.
Okay, @DataProvider.
You create a method that's specifically marked with this annotation.
Right.
And this method is responsible for reading your data from that external source.
Okay.
And providing it to your test method.
Gotcha.
In a structured format.
So the @DataProvider is like the bridge.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
Between our data source and our test method.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
And it's all about separating your test logic from your test data.
Right.
Which makes your tests more organized.
Yeah.
Maintainable and scalable.
That makes a lot of sense. Data-driven testing sounds incredibly useful.
It is.
For just making sure our code can handle a lot of different inputs.
A lot of different situations, yeah. What other techniques can we use to kind of make our testing even more powerful?
Another technique that can significantly speed up your testing process is parallel testing.
Okay, parallel testing.
As we talked about earlier, this involves running multiple tests simultaneously to take advantage of those extra cores in your processor.
It's like having a whole team of testers
Yes.
working on your code at the same time.
A whole army of robots.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we actually set up parallel testing in TestNG?
The configuration for parallel testing happens in the testing.xml file.
Okay, in the testing.xml file.
This file is basically the control center for your TestNG suite.
Gotcha.
Within this file, you can specify how you want your tests to run in parallel.
Okay.
Whether it's by methods, classes, or even entire test suites.
So we can fine-tune a level of parallelism depending on our needs and the resources that we have available.
Right. You can also specify the number of threads that you want to use.
Threads.
Which determines how many tests can run concurrently.
So it's important to strike a balance there.
Yes, you don't want to overload your system.
Right. Using too many threads could actually slow things down. I'm guessing debugging parallel tests can be a little bit more challenging, though.
You're right. When multiple tests are running simultaneously, it can be a bit trickier to pinpoint the exact cause of a failure.
Right.
But TestNG provides tools and techniques to help you isolate failing tests and run them individually in a sequential manner.
Gotcha. So even though parallel testing adds like a layer of complexity, TestNG gives us ways to kind of manage that complexity and keep our debugging process still manageable.
It's all about finding the right balance.
Right.
And the benefits in terms of reducing that test execution time often outweigh the added complexity.
So we've covered data-driven testing for handling a lot of different inputs.
Right.
Parallel testing for speed. What other techniques should we be thinking about with TestNG?
Another really valuable technique, especially for complex test scenarios, is managing test dependencies.
Test dependencies?
So imagine you have a series of tests that need to be executed in a specific order.
Right.
Like you might have a test that creates a user account.
Okay.
And then another test that logs in with that newly created account.
Right. That's a very common scenario in real-world testing.
Exactly. One action kind of sets the stage for the next.
Yeah. How does TestNG handle those types of dependencies?
So within the @test annotation, you can use the depends on methods attribute.
Depends on.
You simply list the methods that your current test method depends on.
Gotcha.
And TestNG will analyze these dependencies and make sure that those dependent methods are executed successfully before running the test method that relies on them.
So if one of those dependent methods fails, the subsequent tests that rely on it won't even run.
Exactly.
Which helps prevent cascading failures.
Right, and gives you a much clearer picture of where the actual problem lies.
This is starting to feel really powerful.
It is.
We're handling all these different data inputs. Running tests in parallel. Managing dependencies.
That's a lot.
I'm starting to see how TestNG can really take our testing to a whole new level.
It's a versatile framework, that's for sure.
Yeah. Are there any common challenges or pitfalls?
Of course.
That we should be aware of as we start implementing these more advanced TestNG techniques?
One common challenge is managing complex configurations.
Configuration.
As your project grows and you start using more advanced features, the testing.xml file can become quite large and intricate.
So it's important to stay organized.
Absolutely.
And keep that configuration file clean and readable.
Use clear naming conventions, comments.
Right.
You can even break your configuration into smaller, more modular files.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any other potential pitfalls?
Another challenge is properly handling exceptions and errors.
Okay, exceptions and errors.
In parallel tests, when multiple tests run concurrently, you can run into unexpected issues that might not happen in sequential execution.
Yeah, so it's really important to have robust error handling in place.
Exactly.
Maybe consider using some specialized logging tools.
Yes, good logging is essential.
That can handle these concurrent processes.
Definitely.
Okay, so speaking of tools,
TestNG
doesn't exist in isolation, right? It actually works really well with a lot of other tools and frameworks.
It does.
That are commonly used in the testing world.
It's a team player.
Yeah, tell me more about how TestNG plays nicely with other tools.
Well, for web application testing, the combination of TestNG and Selenium is almost unbeatable.
Really?
Selenium is super powerful for automating web browsers. And TestNG provides the framework for organizing executing and reporting on those Selenium tests.
So Selenium handles like the browser interactions.
Right.
And then TestNG gives us the structure and the logic for our tests.
Exactly. They complement each other perfectly.
That's great. And we already talked about Maven,
Yeah.
which is essential for managing dependencies and builds.
Right.
It integrates seamlessly with TestNG,
It does.
simplifying our development workflow.
A lot less headaches.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it sounds like TestNG is a real team player.
It is.
It can work effectively with a whole bunch of other tools and frameworks.
Yeah, it fits into the ecosystem really well.
And if we're serious about automating our testing process,
yeah,
and integrating it into like a CI/CD pipeline,
right, CI/CD,
TestNG can play a role there as well.
It definitely can.
So CI/CD is all about automating the build, test, and deploy process.
It is.
So how does TestNG help with that?
TestNG integrates really smoothly with popular CI/CD tools like Jenkins and GitLab CI/CD. This allows you to trigger your TestNG tests automatically.
Wow.
Whenever code changes are pushed, you'll receive detailed reports.
Right.
And you can even automatically deploy your application.
Wow.
Based on the test result.
That's like next level automation.
It is pretty cool.
It sounds like TestNG is a really crucial tool
for
any team that's serious about streamlining their development and testing process.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, so as we kind of wrap up this section on integrating TestNG with other tools, what key takeaways would you want our listeners to walk away with?
I would say the main takeaway is that TestNG is more than just a testing framework.
Yeah.
It's a way of thinking about testing.
A philosophy of testing.
Exactly. It's about embracing a structured, organized, and efficient approach to making sure your software is high quality.
And it's not just about finding bugs.
Right.
It's about building confidence in the software that we create.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Welcome back. It feels like we've been on quite a journey exploring TestNG.
It has been a deep dive.
Yeah, we've seen so many features and how it integrates with other tools to create this really robust testing environment.
It's a powerful framework.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that's really struck me throughout this exploration
is how TestNG goes beyond just being like a testing tool.
It
feels more like a philosophy of testing, like a way of thinking about how to ensure quality and reliability in our software.
I think that's a really insightful observation. At its core, TestNG is about bringing structure, organization, and efficiency to the testing process.
Right.
It's about moving away from that ad hoc kind of testing and embracing a more systematic and maintainable approach.
It's like shifting from a chaotic workshop to a well-organized lab.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. Where every tool has its place.
Right.
Every experiment is carefully documented.
Yeah, exactly. And as we've seen, this organized approach doesn't sacrifice any power or flexibility.
You're right.
TestNG allows us to handle complex scenarios, run tests in parallel for speed, manage those dependencies, even integrate with a whole bunch of other tools.
It's like having a Swiss Army knife for testing.
We have the right tool for any situation.
You do.
But with all this talk about automation and these advanced techniques, I'm curious about the human element. What does the future hold for testers in this increasingly automated world?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one that a lot of testers are thinking about right now.
Yeah.
While automation is definitely playing a much bigger role in testing these days, I believe the role of the tester is evolving. Rather than disappearing.
So instead of being replaced by robots,
right,
testers are taking on new responsibilities.
Absolutely. Testers are becoming more like quality advocates.
Quality advocates?
Yeah, they're playing a key role in making sure that the software meets the highest standards of functionality, performance, security, and user experience.
So they're involved in defining the testing strategies.
Yes.
Designing those really complex test scenarios. And kind of exploring those edge cases.
Right.
That maybe the automated tools might miss.
Exactly. They're thinking outside the box.
So the role of the tester is becoming even more strategic and more impactful.
More important than ever.
Yeah, and with tools like TestNG and their toolkit, testers can focus on those higher level tasks.
Exactly.
And leave those more repetitive and mundane tasks.
Yeah, the boring stuff.
To the automation.
Let the robots do that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into TestNG, what are some of the key takeaways?
The most important takeaway?
Yeah.
Is that TestNG is more than just a framework.
It's
a way of thinking about testing. It's about having that structured, organized, and efficient approach to ensuring software quality.
And remember, it's not just about finding bugs. It's about building confidence in the software that we create.
Very well said.
So for anyone listening who's feeling inspired and wants to start their TestNG journey, what advice would you give them?
I would say just jump in and start experimenting. Don't be afraid to break things. That's how you learn.
Exactly.
Start small. Write a simple test. Explore the annotations. Play around with that testing.xml file. The TestNG community is great. Very helpful.
Lots of resources online.
And as you get more comfortable with the basics, don't be afraid to dive into those more advanced techniques that we talked about. That's where the real power of TestNG is.
Well, I think it's safe to say that this deep dive has given us a whole new appreciation for TestNG.
I think so, too.
And its capabilities.
Yeah, it's a great tool.
I'm feeling energized and ready to put all this knowledge to work.
That's what we like to hear.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
Into TestNG.
We appreciate you listening.
We hope you found it insightful and empowering.
I hope so.
And until next time, happy testing.
Happy testing.